Namaste, welcome to another episode of Now We Must podcast. So today we're going to talk about RAW, the the Indian intelligence agency responsible for the external intelligence, and we also talk about the Chinese intelligence. So how Chinese intelligence actually works, and there is a chapter in the book. Let me hold on. Let me get the book. We also have the soft copy of the book, but it's important that we talk about the book itself. So this is the book that we're going to read today, and here we have a chapter. We have a chapter called "Through China's Looking Glass." So we're going to read this chapter as well, and we're going to also have a presentation where we will see how they actually works, how the Chinese intelligence agencies work, how their framework is. So before we do a deep dive into that, we will actually first go through the presentation itself. So let me just first, yeah, Mm, let me get through this. It's loading. Let it load. Yeah. In the meantime, let me get few things ready, and we'll see if people joining or not. So we'll give a few minutes for people to join in case they are joining. Cool. Okay. People have joined. So we'll start the presentation on Chinese intelligence first. Then we will read the book. So let me share my screen and go to the presentation screen. So first of all, we are going to talk about the books on Chinese intelligence operation. So this is a book collection. So and this is important because a lot of people do not know about the books which are written on Chinese intelligence. It's a very secret agency, but not a lot is written about. So which books you can read? So we'll start with the books and also their context. The Chinese intelligence operations by Nicholas uh, Ephemedius. This seminal text remains foundational in Chinese intelligence literature, presenting a detailed case studies of early operations conducted by the Ministry of State Security. That is the intelligence agency's name. Uh, Epimedius analyzes the importance of scientific and technological collection efforts in shaping China's intelligence landscape. Analytical framework for Chinese intelligence. Epimedius' work established sorry, an analytical framework that continues to be relevant in understanding Chinese intelligence. It emphasizes the complexity of China's intelligence apparatus and the strategic use of information in national security. Early MSS operations case studies. Epimetheus provides notable case studies from early years of the MSS, Ministry of State Security, shedding light on how these operations laid the groundwork for modern practices. This historical context is essential for understanding current Chinese intelligence methodologies. Let me do let me know if you are able to hear my voice in case there is a voice issue. As of now, I don't see any comments, but do let me know if there is any issue. Mosaic approach to intelligence gathering. The concept of mosaic approach introduced by Epimedius remains a pivotal in Chinese intelligence. This method involves piercing through diverse data sources, allowing for a more comprehensive understanding of intelligence targets. Evolution of Chinese intelligence. Chinese Communist Espionage Primer. Chinese Communist Espionage, an intelligence primer by Peter Mattis and Matthew Brazil, provides a detailed analysis of the rise and development of Chinese intelligence agencies, highlighting their unique organizational frameworks and operational methodologies. Organizational histories. Chinese intelligence services have undergone significant evolution, transitioning from early Communist Party efforts to highly structured organizations with defined missions and operational goals that have adopted to have that have adapted to changing geopolitical environments. Profiles of officers. Detailed profiles of known officers offer insights into their roles and contributions within Chinese intelligence operations, revealing how individual leadership has influenced agency effectiveness and strategic direction. Influence of Marxist-Leninist ideology. So this is very unique to actually Chinese intelligence because normally in a nation state, ideology is not the primary motive for a nation state functioning. But China is a very unique example where the state ideology of communism, of Marxist Leninist ideology, plays a very pivotal role, and that's one of the most unique part of Chinese intelligence and the state, the way it has been run. So the operational practices of Chinese intelligence services are heavily influenced by Marxist-Leninist ideology, shaping their methods, objectives, and interactions with both domestic and international entities. Technology and industrial espionage. Chinese industrial espionage. The book Chinese Industrial Espionage provides an in-depth examination of methods China employs to acquire foreign technology. Hannas, Mulv- uh, Mulvenon, and Puglisi detail tactics. Puglisi detail tactics such as cyber espionage, data theft, and the recruitment of foreign experts to bolster Chinese industrial landscape. Intelligence services role. Chinese intelligence services actively support national science and technology objectives by targeting key industries and sectors. Their efforts are aligned with national priorities, ensuring that information gathered is utilized to advance China's technological capabilities to ensure competitiveness. This is something which is well known among circles who track these things, but for a common folk, it may not be as common as we may think so. And that is done by a lot of agencies in so many ways. But it's very prominent and part of their objective, part of their priorities to actually advance the national industrial policies, industrial objectives, and priorities. And in that way, direct role played by the intelligence agencies in China is quite unique. Technology transfer mechanism. China employs various technology transfer mechanisms, including joint ventures, partnerships, and acquisitions of foreign firms. Cyber operations complement these strategies, enhancing China's access to critical technologies and intellectual property across diverse sectors. Sector-specific case studies. Case studies highlight China's industrial espionage in aerospace, advanced materials, and biotechnology. If you know, correct, the coronavirus epidemic, which started in 2020 onwards, And now we have seen credible reports and a lot of writing by various people that this may have been a lab grown virus which was accidentally or maybe by other ways been released and that caused a mayhem across the globe. So intelligence agencies working at the industrial scale and helping industrial capacity and also cyber on cyber technology and especially on biotechnology. Examples include cyber attacks on foreign aerospace firms and efforts to recruit skilled professionals, showcasing a coordinated effort to harness global innovations for national gain. Historical perspective and influence. Chinese spies from Chairman Mao to Xi Jinping. Roger Faligot's work chronicles the evolution of Chinese intelligence from the era of Chairman Mao to Xi Jinping. It highlights key figures, pivotal operations, and transformation of intelligence practices over the decades. Development of intelligence services. Chinese intelligence services have undergone significant transformation since their inception, adapting to geopolitical shifts and the country's changing priorities. This evolution reflects the increasing sophistication and capabilities of these agencies. Role of Soviet advisors. Soviet advisors played a crucial role in shaping the early intelligence framework of the People's Republic of China. Their influence is evident in operational strategies, training, and the establishment of foundational intelligence structures. Intelligence operations in Europe. Chinese intelligence operations expanded significantly in Europe, particularly during the Cold War, leveraging relationships with overseas Chinese communities. These operations aimed to gather strategic information while fostering networks of influence. Impact on overseas Chinese communities. Overseas Chinese communities have served as both assets and targets for intelligence operations. These communities provide vital networks for information gathering while also facing scrutiny from Chinese authorities to maintain loyalty and control. Information control and modern context. Media influence on public perception. In The Party Line, How the Media Dictates Public Opinion in Modern China. This is a book. Doug Young examines the mechanisms through which the state controls media narratives, shaping public perception and discourse on national issues. Intelligence and information control. The Chinese government employs sophisticated information control strategies that are interconnected with its intelligence collection practices, allowing for the manipulation of narratives both domestically and internationally. Feedback loops in policy making. China's control of information creates feedback loops where intelligence collection informs policy development, reinforcing the government's narrative and ensuring alignment with public propaganda efforts. Contemporary intelligence research. Significant academic articles shed light on the evolution of Chinese intelligence, such as studies detailing its global operational expansion and integration of technological advancements into traditional practices. This is the end of presentation. Let me see. Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. Namaste, Shekhar. Let me see. There is some network issue. I can see there's a little bit of network chug going on. Let me just try to close a few windows. And now we will start reading the book. So we have a lot of content on this book itself, presentation and other things. So we will go through. Now let me prep the book. Yeah, it will take 30 seconds for the book to be loaded. Just give some time. Hmm. It's an interesting book that we're going to discuss today. So, okay, now let me load the screen. So, let me know if you can see the screen. Yeah, I think the screen is now visible. Let me check. So, we are going to read through the book itself. So, this is chapter 10 of the book, the ultimate goal. So we're going to read through this book and we're going to understand through China's looking glass. Okay, so before we do the reading also, let me give you a perspective on what is this through China's looking glass means, because it's a very cryptic statement. Let me give you a bit more perspective on this. Let me get the not this one. Hold on. I had one presentation document ready for this as well. Let it come. Loading. Let it load. Should be on now. Namaste, Didi. Yes, please, please. Okay, this is now loaded. Do let me know if you can see the screen. It's the text a little bit. Let me enhance it for you. Yes, it should be. So, China's looking glass, perception and strategy. China's intelligence services operate through a lens that seamlessly blends pragmatism with ideology. So, what is China's looking glass policy? So Chinese intelligence services operate through a lens that seamlessly blends pragmatism with ideology. Drawing heavily from Sun Tzu's art of war, intelligence in the Chinese strategic mindset is not merely about collecting secrets. It is about shaping environments, controlling narratives, and ensuring long-term strategic advantage. In some ways, a democratic country like India and other countries lack this kind of strategic vision, which actually Chinese intelligence has developed over the years. Unlike the often tactical, short-term, and adversarial intelligence models seen in Western nations, China employs a holistic, multi-layered approach that integrates espionage into nearly every facet of national life. The looking glass model of intelligence. Rather than treating intelligence as a state versus state operation with a clear cut adversaries, China's approach is deeply embedded within a broader framework of national strategy. Intelligence gathering is not limited to traditional government agencies but extends into business sector, academia, diaspora communities, and even social organizations. This decentralized multi-vector approach transforms civilians and institutions into a force multipliers, allowing Beijing to cast a much wider net for intelligence collection than traditional Western agencies. China's model can be characterized as a looking glass rather than a mirror approach, where Western intelligence agencies often see their adversaries as a reflection of themselves, operating under a transactional and zero sum paradigm. Beijing employs a more fluid, long term perspective. Deception, patience, and the gradual accumulation of influence are prioritized over immediate tactical gains. The example of this would be the Belt and Road Initiative, where China has invested almost $1 trillion. Now, that investment is creating a long term foothold in terms of its influence over the government and over the country's institution, also into the people itself. So it's a long term objective. The Belt and Road Initiative would be carried out for next 25 years. So they will build an influence, accumulate power, or accumulate influence over that country's governance, its perception, its narrative by investing in a long term manner. So BRI is one of the primary examples how it actually works. Deception, patience, gradual accumulation of influence are prioritized over immediate tactical gains. Information is not merely harvested for advantage, it is curated and leveraged to systematically redefine global power structures. By subtly guiding and influencing decision-making process in other nations. It means their institutions, their politicians, their academia, their institutions of repute in terms of education. China seeks to draw adversaries into strategic orbit without direct confrontation. So it's like if you have an adversary, work with them and try to neutralize them or get them to into their sphere of influence, not as an adversary, but make them into harmless friends or harmless enemies. Strategic objective of Chinese intelligence. Chinese intelligence objectives can be broadly categorized into the following. Economic and technological superiority. Industrial espionage is a key component of China's intelligence operations. Companies in sectors such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, biotechnology are prime targets for intellectual property theft. This enables China to accelerate its technological advancements while reducing reliance on foreign expertise. So we have seen the company Huawei, who was banned from many Western and also in India to actually participate in tenders and bidding process. Why it happened? Because the Chinese intelligence uses these companies as a tool, as an extension of its own arm to actually benefit China in the long run. That's why they were banned. So you had Huawei and many other companies who were doing this. The Thousand Talents program and similar initiatives actively recruit top scientists and engineers from abroad, leveraging their expertise to bolster China's strategic industries. Political influence and narrative control. Unlike Western intelligence operations, which often focus on disrupting adversaries, China aims to shape global discourse and subtly guide political development. This is achieved through the media influence campaigns, investment in foreign infrastructure projects, Belt and Road Initiative, which I had talked about, and fostering a pro-China sentiment in international organizations. So we all know the role played by World Health Organization in the COVID pandemic era and how it was actually manipulated to actually toe Chinese line. And for the first time, if you see, whenever there is epidemic, a global epidemic happens, the virus is named after that country itself. So you had Spanish flu, Spanish flu, or the plague itself. The Spanish flu is, and you have many other things. So normally they will be named after them. For the first time in history, where China, the virus was found, and from its spread, but the naming was done as COVID-19, not as some city name where it was first found. So you can see how WHO, the World Health Organization, was actually armed to state to actually make sure the naming convention is not followed. United Front work, an effort led by Chinese Communist Party, coordinates influence operations among overseas Chinese communities, ensuring alignment with Beijing strategies. Military and strategic positioning. China's intelligence efforts in the military domain are geared toward asymmetric warfare, cyber operations, and space-based reconnaissance. PLA-affiliated intelligence units conduct extensive cyber espionage, targeting defense contractors, research institutions, and government agencies worldwide. By establishing foothold in critical global supply chains and infrastructure projects, China ensures that its strategic needs are met while creating potential leverage points against adversaries. Role of deception and psychological operations. China's intelligence doctrine places a high emphasis on deception, Zhao and psychological operations, borrowing from historical strategies such as winning without fighting. Chinese operatives aim to manipulate perceptions rather than engage in overt conflict. It is very different the way American or British or European agencies work. Disinformation campaign, social media manipulation, and economic coercion are all tools employed to weaken adversaries from within. Countering the Chinese intelligence threat. Given the expansive and deeply embedded nature of China's intelligence operations, countering its influence requires a multifaceted approach. Enhanced counterintelligence measures. We will talk about this later. We will just now going to read the book itself. Now let me read the book. Through China's Looking Glass. James Shi Cheng James Shi Cheng Chow was an ambitious and enterprising young man who left his temporary home in Taiwan in 1958 to seek his fortune in the United States. He had studied at the Shanghai Xiao Tong University along with the future mayor of Shanghai and general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, Jiang Zemin, who incidentally went on to become the president of China between 1993 and 2003. James Chow kept in touch with Jiang after he left China, and two would meet frequently. After Zhao formed his foremost group, which dealt with shipping. Among other things, in 1964, he ordered two ships to be built in Shanghai when Jiang was mayor of the city. James Chow became an all-American philanthrope and therefore an eminently acceptable Chinese American. Soon the foremost group was charting its ships to Chinese giants like Costco uh, and charting its ships to Chinese giants like Costco and Sino-Trans. Elaine Chow, Elaine Chow, James Chow's oldest daughter, married Senator Mitch McConnell in February 1993, who is currently the US Senate Majority Leader. So I gave you a presentation how China's looking glass policy works and also what are its objectives. Now, this chapter we am reading is going to give you how it actually is done on ground. The chapter is maybe a bit boring for people. That's why I had the presentation early to give you the context. How Chinese intelligence actually works, what is their philosophy. The chapter will now describe how it actually is implemented on ground. So stay put and just we'll read through this. Who is currently the state Senate Majority Leader. Shortly after their marriage, McConnell and Elaine called on Jiang Zemin in Beijing, accompanied by James Chow. Elaine went to become George W. Bush's Labor Secretary and is now President Trump's Transport Secretary. In 2008, the couple received a sum between 5 to 25 million from James Chow, according to New York Times report dated 16 September 2019. It also discloses that the foremost group had received hundreds of millions of dollars as loans from Chinese government banks to help build ships that the company purchased from government-owned shipyards in China. As Transport Secretary, it was alleged that Elaine enabled her family's shipping company to transport raw material from US and Canada to China. The plot thickens. Soon after Donald Trump was elected president, Elaine's young sister, Angela, who was CEO of Foremost Group, was appointed to the board of directors at the Bank of China. This was Angela's second major assignment in China. Along with her father, she was also a member of the board of China State Shipbuilding Corporation, the country's largest defense contractor. No one apparently even raised an eyebrow in the US that the Senate Majority Leader's sister in law was on the board of a major business rival of the country. Not to mention the fact that she was also a board member of China's national bank. This naturally provided superb access to the Chinese and the CCP for its influence operations. There are other stories too. How Robert Hunter Biden, the son of former Vice President Joe Biden, traveled with his father on Air Force Two Air Force Two to China in December 2013, where he struck a private deal to establish a 1 billion investment fund with a company called Bohai Harvest RST, which had the support of the Chinese government. The Chinese, in effect, gave the American vice president's son a gift of $1 billion. It is impossible to assume that the Biden would see anything remotely evil about China, considering that Biden is currently ahead of Trump in the run-up to the forthcoming elections. Should he win the presidency, the US-China relationship could alter. A love of gain. Chinese communists. The communist China has perfected the art of influencing people and making them do what is best for the country. It has done this through subterfuge, financial tie-ups, bribery, blackmail, and much more. The scale of its operations in subverting American and other Western leaders and businesses is so vast and profound that China is actually viewed as a benefactor and savior of the West, not its mortal enemy. It is on this narrative so assiduously and consciously cultivated that its success rests. The COVID-19 global pandemic will surely dent this narrative, but it is too early to say whether it will succeed in discrediting it entirely. Besides, older civilizations have deep roots, great resilience, and unwavering momentum once they start on a particular path. China is a great civilization nation. The, the chivalry of Chinese nobility more than 2,500 years ago worked on the principle of Li, what was What was not Li is roughly translated into something that was not done. When when the Duke Jiang of Song, who reigned from 650 to 637 BCE, faced a powerful enemy about faced faced a powerful enemy about to cross a river to attack his forces. His adversaries urged him to attack the invaders as they crossed the river, for they would lower their river for they would lower their defenses then, but the Duke would have none of it. This was not Lee, he declared. So he let the invaders cross the river, reassemble for battle, after which he attacked them. He suffered a disastrous defeat, and when his aides criticized him for this, he loftily declared that the wise do not crush the weak or attack the enemy till they are ready. These stories of foolish integrity, this is something a parallel which we can draw from the Islamic invasion that India had suffered in 1000 years, especially the earlier invasions by Muhammad Ghazni, who actually attacked Somnath temple for 17 times. These stories of foolish integrity are fondly retold by the Chinese. This might have been standard operating procedure in the days when opposing armies met on the battlefield, exchanged noble greetings from chariots, and even raised a toast before firing the first shot. Fast forward to the 19th century, and the Chinese were appalled at the idea of enticing the British invading forces at Ningpo during the first Opium War into capturing deliberately infected cattle. However, by the 20th century, the attitudes had changed. Mao Zedong would frequently declare that he was no Jiang of Song, Duke Jiang of Song, as he did battle in his long march. He would have none of the battlefield niceties of the ancient Duke. Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Ian Johnson asked in February 2018, who killed more, Hitler, Stalin, or Mao? And answered, it is probably fair to say then that Mao was responsible for about 1.5 million deaths during the Cultural Revolution, another million for the other campaigns, and between 35 million and 45 million for the Great Leap famine. Taking a middle number for the famine, 40 million, that's about 42 million deaths. Ambition was an attribute of Mao's that got him where he wanted to be, and paranoia kept him there. The numbers killed by a dictator in his own country are never a problem when it comes to the strategic interest. Churchill and Roosevelt never had a problem meeting Stalin at Yalta and uh, Potsdam to decide how to carve out control in Germany after Hitler's defeat. Similarly, Nixon had no qualms meeting Mao in 1972. The Chinese leadership under President for life Xi Jinping has been exhibiting the same attribute in its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, as perhaps the leaders uh, as perhaps the leaders did through China's earlier misadventures. Callous denial and obfuscation obfuscation of the narrative. In the years to come, the world could well make its peace with Chinese leadership and revert to business as usual, unless other powers fill the gap and became the factory of the world. That is the nature of international relations and the reality of the game of control and dominance. Sun Tzu 330 to 220 BCE, along with Confucius 551 to 479 BCE, and Menzi 372 to 294 BCE represents the great thinkers, sages of China. Sun Tzu had a particularly dim view of the nature of man. Man is born with a love of gain. This was something that Adam Smith was to repeat centuries later. Sun Tzu elaborated Sun Tzu elaborated it thus: if he indulges this love, he will be quarrelsome and greedy, shedding all sense of courtesy or humanity. He is born with feelings of envy, hatred, and if he indulges these, they will lead him to they will lead him into violence and villainy, and all sense of loyalty and good faith will disappear. Man is born with desires of the senses, and if he indulges these, he will be mm, listen to us and wanton, and will observe neither propriety nor principle, a rather damning indictment. Sun Tzu went on to say, if he is clever, he will surely be a robber. If he is brave, he will be a bandit. If he is able, he will cause trouble. If he is a debater, his arguments will make nonsense. His arguments will make nonsense. The China of Mao and his successors was definitely going to be different from the legacy of Duke of Song. Catherine Luong, Leong exemplifies this. Born in Guangzhou, she arrived in the US on a Taiwanese passport. Later in life, after her education in America, she described herself as a venture capitalist and ran a bookstore in uh, Monterey Park, close to Los Angeles. She and her husband moved into a 2 million home in San Marino, a nearly all-white, extremely wealthy neighborhood. Leong was a socialite in California and a fundraiser for the Republicans. She quickly climbed the social ladder. Her activities soon attracted the FBI, and she was recruited by them in 1980s for espionage against the Chinese. Leong was Leong was a spy for the Americans against the Chinese, while in her other avatar she was a spy for the Chinese against the Americans, a classic double agent. She had two pseudonyms: Luo Zhongshan, Luo Zhongshan, used by the Chinese Ministry of State Security, while in the records of her FBI handlers, she was parlor maid. Both her first handler, both her first handler for 20 years, James J. Smith, and his superior, William Cleveland, were her lovers. The comfortable arrangement did not seem to bother her husband too much. Leong was operating at a time when China had just begun to open up after uh, Deng Xiaoping declared the four modernizations in 1977. Everybody was in the race for building upon this and creating influence abroad. Catherine Leong earned 1.2 million from the Canadian telecommunications company Nortel for leading them to Chinese leadership. Guangxi she had used Guangxi, meaning networks, connections, and relations, something very typical to and essential in China. She had 16 foreign bank accounts in Hong Kong and China and operated several companies from Hong Kong. Leong accompanied former mayor of Los Angeles, Richard Riordan, to meet President Jiang Zemin. Moreover, President Yang Shakun, who served between 1988 and 93, also liked her. She had access to several ministers in the country as well. In the process, she earned 1.7 million from the U.S. government and 100,000 from Chinese for services rendered. Leong was flying too high for some, so surveillance ensured surveillance ensued, and in 2003 she was charged for unauthorized possession of defense secrets, but not for espionage. 2 years later, Leong was freed by the court with a fine, thanks to a messed up investigation. The case was closed, but the mystery was not solved. All that can be concluded is that there was a deal somewhere to avoid embarrassment. The operation was a mixture of intelligence collection, building influence for creating soft power shifts. The Chinese communists began spying on the United States even before 1949. Their first recruit was possibly a CIA translator named Larry Wu Tai Chin in 1948, who worked for them for more than 3 decades. He gave the Chinese government advance information about Nixon's plans to normalize relations with Beijing. There were others too, mostly from the Chinese diaspora, who helped with the collection of military technology related intelligence. US counterintelligence would regularly pick up Chinese spies, most of whom were expatriates. Many of them had been hunting for military and technology secrets with a considerable success. Beyond normal intelligence collection, which led to the acquisition of classified information, the Chinese successfully set up their own think tanks as well. The China Institute of Contemporary International, the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations (CICIR) is run by the Ministry of State Security, and the China Institute for International Strategic Studies (CIISS) is affiliated with the People's Liberation Army military intelligence. The present head of CICIR is from the Communist Party, but his predecessor was a researcher. But his predecessor was a researcher in the organization who had worked up in the organization who had worked his way up. The CIISS is headed by a senior member of the Chinese military intelligence, quite often the deputy chief of staff. Both organizations use their academic credentials to seek access to foreign officials and other analysts for information. These platforms provide China with access to gossip, trends of thought, how future senior officials might think, and other information normally not available to the public. This then becomes an input for intelligence, for influence building, and for creating narratives. These institutions have, however, been known as covers for clandestine operations as well. India and Tibet were neighbors for centuries, but India and China became neighbors only gradually as China made inroads into Tibet, and India kept retreating issue by issue. Barely 12 years after independence in 1959, India gave shelter to Dalai Lama as he fled Chinese oppression. Mao's China did not forgive Nehru's India for this effort. The results were unhappy for India, and China succeeded in achieving its multiple objectives. Then came the India-China War of 1962. In retrospect, it was India that got invaded into inveigled into conflict. Non-aligned India was forced to seek Western assistance, which was available only at a price. The then American Secretary of State, Averell Harriman, and his British counterpart, Duncan Sandys, rushing to India to offer help in return for a deal with Pakistan on Kashmir. The Chinese won the friendship of Pakistan's then President Muhammad Ayub Khan, drove a wedge in the anti-communist US-led Southeast Asia Treaty. Oh, that's interesting. Wedge in the anti-communist US-led Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, (CETO). There were two organizations, CETO and CENTO, succeeded in having a counter to its ideological rival, Nikita Khrushchev's Soviet Union, and damaged India's credibility as a non-aligned nation. Consequently, India's other neighbors went scurrying for cover and sought room for maneuver between their two bigger neighbors. For decades now, India's relation with both its neighbors, which became nuclear armed countries as well, have remained in a drought. A high volume, a, a, a high volume of trade where the Chinese take away India's raw materials and dump their products into the country is not an indication of a healthy relationship. It is more like a colonial arrangement. Meanwhile, China has also surged ahead relentlessly as a military, economic, and technological force to reckon with. With its rise has come a growing desire to project itself as a continental force as well, which it has done through its Belt and Road Initiative, from its land borders all the way into Western Europe. China now has interest and presence in seas from the Korean Peninsula through the Western Pacific and up to the eastern coast of Africa, with bases in Djibouti in East Africa, Gwadar in Pakistan. It sees itself moving into a position in the Middle East, partly as a replacement for the US and partly in contestation with Russia. China sees itself as a rival to the US in the Western Pacific as well. It has begun a fashion. It has begun a fashion its narrative. It has begun to fashion its narrative according to its emerging interests and capabilities. Asia is changing, and China is a principal cause. The structure of power and parameters of interaction that have characterized international relations are being fundamentally altered by China's growing economic and military power. Rising political influence, distinctive diplomatic voice, and increasing involvement in regional multinational institutions, says David Shambaugh, director of the China Policy Program at George Washington University, in his 2005 book, Power Shift China and Asia's New Dynamics. Soft power play. China exerted its soft power by abandoning the usual export of ideology and substituting it instead with building strategic partnership with neighbors. It also followed the British and American examples of opening its educational institutions to students from its periphery. It may be difficult to quantify the exact benefits from this education, but it did serve the purpose of getting across China's points of view and creating awareness and empathy about its society, culture, history, and politics. This was an influence builder, but perhaps only to a limited extent. Unlike what America and Britain obtained from offering education to young from other countries, China's rise as a military and economic power was impressive, and by the end of the 20th century, it was clear that China would be challenging the US for global supremacy. It, however, needed a strategy which would counterbalance its image as a hard military and political power. It needed soft power, something that is derived from culture, which makes a country attractive enough to others to want to emulate its political values. The ability of the country to abide by them at home and abroad is an important aspect of this image. Its policies need to be realistic and legitimate as a model figure of authority. This is a kind of image that the US and the West have been able to project historically. China's charm offensive in Latin America and Africa, regardless of any moral compul- uh, compulsions about the nature of the states it was dealing with, succeeded to a limited extent. Europe, US, India, Japan remained skeptical of such overtures. The Beijing Olympics of 2008 and the Shanghai Expo of 2009 were mega successes as an exhibition of country's soft power. But China's human rights record was sordid enough. Its crackdown on activists and the jailing of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo after the award had been announced did not help its image. An infuriated China, an infuriated China retaliated by banning the import of salmon from Norway, which achieved nothing for for it either. Like most autocratic regimes, Chinese leadership presumes that the main method of the main method of exercising or promoting soft power is through state institutions. They mistake government propaganda for soft power in the age of information overload. Xinhua, the China, Xinhua and China's Central Television are no rivals to Reuters, AFP, CNN, or BBC. Weibo cannot match the global reach of Facebook or Twitter. All it can do is to restrict outside information and influence from coming into China. But the country's voice outside its borders remains brittle, wooden, and largely unintelligible. The West, on the other hand, built its soft power early in the 20th century when there were few rivals. It consolidated its narrative by co opting the private sector, civic society, and individuals in building its image. Beijing does not have a Hollywood that has a universal reach. It does not have the English language. The absence of these two does not restrict the growth of technological, military, and economic power, but it does limit China's profile and influence. It is encouraging. It is encouraging people in other Asian countries to learn Mandarin as their second language, especially where languages like Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese may have something more in common with Mandarin than with English. Try as China might, though Mandarin is hardly likely to replace English as the global language. Espionage for technology and information warfare, or political warfare, as as it is also known, have been two main priorities of Chinese intelligence. Political warfare is meant to shape perceptions and perceptions and the way people at home and abroad think of China. Commenting on the American ability to exert its soft power in the context of the CIA's notorious interrogation techniques, the Chinese government mouthpiece, Global Times, said on 11 December 2014 that the US was able to spin such wicked acts as prisoner prisoner abuse to become a positive through mobilizing pro-US forces worldwide. It went on to say that this was a result of US soft power, which was positioned at the center of global order, and that this gave them incomparable abilities in controlling resources and discourse power. We will hold on. Let me see. We will. Okay, unknown gunmen. Good. Okay, so we're going to end this reading today. I have few other things to do, but we're going to continue this series. So we're going to read the ultimate goal as well as few other chapters from the other book, the unending game, and also we will share some other data on presentations. Okay, some questions. Let me answer some questions. Okay. Milton Friedman asks, Dada, isn't Chinese intelligence called, yeah, Ministry of State Security, MSS? It's called MSS, correct? It is there in the presentation. If you just go a bit early, you will see the presentation and you will see the MSS mentioned there in the presentation itself. Okay, Dada, I want to know if anything about money mentioned in this book. As Pavneet Singh said, intelligence agencies use illegitimate money. I need to check and confirm on this, but there might be some uh, mentions here. But that we will see. I need to see whether they have especially mentioned this or not, because there's no evidence. You won't find any evidence regarding this, so it's all going to be assumptions. But I will check on this. Okay, so these are only two questions which are there. So what we'll do is we will end this reading today. We'll continue this reading session and give you more information on the intelligence operation and even how India's raw actually works, and in the next session we are going to talk about counterintelligence from raw and Indian intelligence agencies, how they actually operate. And also we will also have some data on the foundation of the raw itself and their achievements in terms of intelligence gathering and helping India in many ways. We will talk about this in our next session. So do tune in. And for now, thank you. Goodbye. Jai Shri Ram. Vande Mataram.